Hello everyone, welcome back to another interview here on Play on GAA. My name is Seamus Brady. I have Luke Peyton here with me and a special guest, the host of Smaller Fish GAA Podcast, Colm Parkinson, one of the inspirations for me and Luke starting our own podcast. Colm, how's things?
Not too bad, lads. Good to meet you.
But pleasure having you on. And just before we get into the interview, obviously one of the points that me and Luke agree with you the most on is obviously the absolute state of the Leinster Championship, but myself and Luke being two dubs, we're not looking too good right now. Is that kind of giving you a bit more hope for the Leinster Championship?
I suppose the Leinster Championship isn't going too well. We're having a terrible league in general. The Kildare and Dublin are at the bottom of one. We have Offaly and Meath at the bottom of two. We have Wicklow and Laois at the bottom of three, and Longford. So it's a disastrous league. It's going to be a disastrous Leinster Championship, but it's going to be more competitive. But it doesn't look like we've any standout teams. I wouldn't really put Dublin back into that category yet. I think we've been maybe beaten into submission in Leinster for the last 15 years, with Dublin just winning it so often that, I don't know, maybe the morale is low amongst the counties. I thought Kildare and Meath, I still think they're improving counties. You know, they're just maybe like Kildare aren't having a bad league. I don't know. It depends what way you want to paint it, I suppose. You could paint it that it's awful, or you could put more of a positive slant on it and say the Dubs aren't gone at all. Kildare and Meath are improving. And maybe it's not as all. We'll see in the championship, I suppose. It's hard to draw conclusions just in the league.
Yeah, without doubt. I mean, so obviously going back the start of your career, then the success that you've had at the minors, you were part of that minor side in '96 that obviously were all Ireland champions. And then you had yourself on that team, you had Beano MacDonald on that team, you had Chris Conway on that team. Obviously, you were a young lad back then, but did you kind of fully grasp the hype, the kind of excitement that would be attached to a first All-Ireland minor title?
Probably not, no. We wouldn't have, because we wouldn't have known any better. We were only young, and it was actually huge in Laois. We didn't really appreciate it because it was incredible in 1996. That was the first ever Football Ireland Laois had won, and the senior match was a draw between Meath and Mayo. So for our homecoming, there was about 15,000 people in Portlaoise, and they were all up the Dublin Road, and we were on an open top bus, and all the RT cameras and everything were down at this because there was no homecoming at the senior, which they would have gone to. So we got massive kind of exposure to it. Like, there was security guards keeping people back from us and everything. Like at 17, 18 years of age, it was incredible. And then in 1997, they went and won it again. And it was like, what the hell is going on here? In 98, they got into the final. Again, nearly won 3 in a row. So, it was incredible times. And then, obviously, you see old men crying and you don't understand what this is all about. And I think if Laois ever win anything again, I might cry myself because it doesn't look like it's going to happen again. So I suppose you understand where they were all coming from back then.
Yeah.
Hi, Colm. Just kind of going on to another one of your successes, kind of want to ask about the Sigerson Cup. Kind of, you remember that team, the IT Tralee team, 99, and like with players like Alan Brogan as well. Like we've all kind of been watching the competition in recent years, and it's kind of gone strength to strength. So if you could just kind of tell us about your experience of the competition, and as well, like what's the future with as well. There's been a bit of debate as well about should the competition have its own time to avoid injuries for players in it as well. So just if you could kind of talk about the future of the competition as well and your experience in that.
The Sigerson should have its own space. Everything's all on top of each other, and I don't think that the new structure is going to help that because it's actually putting a lot more games into a tighter time frame. So it doesn't look good for the Sigerson at the moment, and like anyone that's played Sigerson love it. I'm not sure it's captured the imagination of the whole GAA public, but certainly it's very, very highly regarded amongst the players. I played Sigerson with Waterford IT, with DIT, with Tralee IT, and with Maynooth. So I've done four different Sigerson teams. We won it in Tralee. That was 3 in a row for Tralee. And Jim McGuinness, Porrick Joyce, and these fellas were down there. It wasn't the star-studded Tralee team was in 1998, the year before I went down. Seamus Moynihan was on that, Mike Frank Russell, Michael Donlan. They'd all gone when we got down. So we actually had a much more workman-like team, less stars on it, still some brilliant players on it, but it was more of a surprise that the third year team won it than the first two. There wasn't as many Galacticos, if you want to call them. But probably the best Sigerson team I've played on was the one in Maynooth. Like, it's absolutely incredible team. It had all stars: Barry Cahill, John Keane, Mark O'Shea, Alan Brogan. You had loads more players. Myself, Ross Munnelly. You had Rory Kavanagh on it. You had loads of inter-county players. Alan Dillon, another all-star. The problem with that team was that I was the only one playing senior at the time. They were all just under 21. So while you look back on that team now and you go, holy shit, that was the most incredible team. On paper at that time, it probably didn't look maybe as good as it does now, but definitely looking back on it, I knew how good all those lads were. And I wasn't hugely surprised to see a lot of them get all-stars and a lot of them win All-Irelands as well.
So is that like half the challenge then at Sigerson, is just to find a balance for the lads, that you see some of the teams that have won it in recent years, and that like often the 15 probably best players don't normally end up winning it, but it's the players that kind of fit into the system. And I suppose we've kind of seen that in recent years as well.
Well, that's the thing about Sigerson, is usually played in shite weather. And I think if we went up and beat St. Mary's of Belfast, and I think they had got to the final, or they'd done well the year before and had a lot of that team. And we went up, I remember Mark O'Shea marking Stephen O'Neill, and he cleaned Stephen O'Neill out, and Stephen O'Neill had broken through at that stage. Mark was a year off breaking through with Kerry, and it was a great battle, but it was a lovely day. And we beat them kicking football because they were young and they were light. But it's the teams that win the Sigerson, I find, that they have to have a few dogs on it, like the good club players that love those conditions. And we went down and we were beaten by UCC. I was marking Paul Galvin actually that day. He was playing wing back. And I definitely didn't forget him that day. Talking about intensity from him, I was like, who the hell is this fella? But he hadn't broken onto the Kerry team either at that stage. And but you needed fellas that were strong to beat us by a couple of points in an awful day, rain, wind up in Sligo. And I think maybe the conditions on the sea, you often see Jordanstown, they're usually the most star-studded team, and they always underachieve, I think, because maybe the conditions at that time of the year don't suit them.
Yeah, that could have been it this year. I mean, this year Ulster University had like Conor Glass, the Thomas Galligan, the Niall Loughlin, and me and Luke were kind of picking them as like, if they put out their strongest bunch, it'll be hard to look past them. But obviously, as you'd won your Sigerson, you'd got onto the senior side. You made your debut against Westmeath in '98, and by this point, then all the talented lads have really come through from the minor sides that you're talking about. And then you get Mick O'Dwyer coming in as manager in 2002. Now, obviously, like right up there as one of, if not the best manager that's ever been in the game. And just kind of, what was it like to be in the dressing room with, a legend like that?
It was incredible when Micko took us over, because we had a brilliant bunch of players and we had underachieved an awful lot the previous 2 years under Colm Brown. It just wasn't a happy camp. Lads weren't committing because training was dreadfully boring. And under Tom Cribben, we'd almost made the breakthrough. We drew with Dublin, and Ian Robertson actually picked the ball up off the ground and hand passed a point, I'm pretty sure, to equalise. So the team was ready to make the breakthrough. Then we had 2 terrible years under Colm Brown. And then Micko came in and we were 2 more years older. And, it was just primed for him, really. Like, we would have been 24, 25, a lot of the 96 minors, and we're ready to go. Expectations weren't all that high because of the dreadful 2 years under Colm Brown. And, kind of when you have a manager like Mick O'Dwyer telling you that you're as good as anyone he's managed, and he'd send us off for laps and we'd come back and he'd tell us a story about Jack O'Shea or Pat Spillane, and he'd be comparing lads to them. And, you just feel $1 million, you feel 10 feet tall, and what Micko was brilliant at was just giving you incredible confidence. It's not necessarily, it's well documented that tactically he wouldn't have been too much into tactics, but he certainly had you going out feeling brilliant about yourself and encouraged to express yourself on the field, and things like that. So I think all the motivation wise, Micko was excellent. Like, I mean, it's no surprise why he was so successful in the era that he was so successful.
Yeah, and so we in that era, I suppose then as well, like the Leinster Finals came 2003, 2005, 2007, and like going back to our original point on the Leinster Championships, like those games where there'd be 80,000 in attendance, the atmosphere would be incredible and everything as well. Can you kind of compare that to what the Leinster Championship that we're looking at now, where maybe a Leinster final Dublin games would have maybe 25,000, 30,000 in Croke Park with no atmosphere. Just can you talk to us about what it was like participating in Leinster finals back when there was full houses coming into Croke Park?
Yeah, well, there would only be full houses when Dublin would be playing. Like, we played Westmeath in a Leinster final in 2004. Still, there'd be 45,000 at it, which, it's a good crowd. The atmosphere was incredible. We played Dublin in 2007, and that was a full house. That was just incredible. The whole stadium rocked, especially when Dublin got a couple of goals just before half time. Like, they were huge occasions, because Dublin, I think they beat us by 7 points, but they wouldn't have been unbackable favourites against us that year. Like, that would have been seen by a lot of people as a 50-50 game. But that was coming from an era where Leinster was incredibly exciting. Like, you had Meath winning Leinster in 96, or winning the All-Ireland in 96 and 99. Kildare got to the All-Ireland final, beating Kerry in 98. Like, the Dublin had won it in 95. You had teams that were not only winning Leinster, but were going on to win All-Irelands. You had Offaly winning Leinster, you had Meath winning Leinster, you had Kildare winning Leinster, you had Dublin winning Leinster, you had Laois winning Leinster, you had Westmeath winning Leinster, all in about 7 years. So, like, I mean, it'll never get any better than that for the Leinster Championship. Like, how we can get back to that, I don't think we ever can. I think Dublin probably too strong population-wise, because it is a numbers game as well. Like, I mean, if all things being equal, it is a numbers game. And for the last maybe 15 years, all things haven't been equal, because Dublin have been probably getting a leg up that they needed back in 2002. And that's only finally been kind of equalised now. I saw this week the other Leinster counties are getting 30 more games development officers, and hopefully that'll continue. And Leinster football needs that. The clubs in Leinster need it, and that kind of feeds through into the senior team. So Kildare and Meath, we could have a 3-horse race potentially, because, like, again, it is a numbers game, and population-wise, they could potentially challenge. Maybe a Laois or Westmeath might come once in a blue moon again, or an Offaly or whatever. But I don't think it's never been the case anyways throughout the history. Really, obviously, that spell, that golden era of the Leinster Championship, that's unique. That wouldn't have been all that common.
Yeah, and then obviously the cherry on top is your Leinster title in 2003. Like, was that a real kind of fulfilling of a dream in some sorts?
Yeah, probably not for me. I had a disastrous year that year. I spent the whole year injured. I played really well during the league that year in Micko's first year. Micko loved me. Like, I mean, he I was playing wing forward. I think it's my best position, that or wing back. And I was flying it during the league. And then in the first round of the Leinster Championship, I destroyed my hamstring. Like, I didn't just tear it. The back of my leg was black, like the whole way down to my ankle. It had bled down. And I missed 10 weeks in total. So Laois were having the greatest year, in how many years since we've won it. And I was sitting on the sideline completely detached from it and didn't feel really part of it. And I just found it incredibly frustrating, because I don't know. I just I was just so used to always being on the team and, being a big part of Laois wins, that I felt I didn't enjoy that year at all, funnily enough. Like, I mean, it was a weird one. When I look back on the Leinster in 2003, I don't really have good memories of it. And then the All-Ireland quarter-final against Armagh, I was only back, not long back from the injury, and I was brought on in that game and brought off again, like humiliating stuff in Croke Park in front of whatever, a very big crowd in Croke Park. So I want to forget about 2003 instead of looking back on it with good memories. It's a funny one.
But so then with all the success kind of that you've had, though, like, you look at the 6 county titles, like, we'll discount that one Leinster title year. So is there a particular competition win, even just season, that is most fond in your memory kind of then?
Yeah, well, the Portlaoise, like, the year we got to the All-Ireland Club final and were beaten by a point by Ballina in 2004. We won the Leinster. We beat Screen in the final that year. I was captain. I got Laois Player of the Year. I got Leinster Player of the Year. That was by far my most consistent season with the club. There's no doubt about that. And most enjoyable. We got on a great run. We had a brilliant team. Terribly frustrating to not have won it. We didn't perform on the day. What really messed us up was we were. I think if the structure of the club championship back then was what it is now, where you're going to play the Leinster final, 2 weeks later semi-final, and a week or two later you can continue that momentum, because we were flying it in Leinster. Nobody could touch us. We destroyed Road, we beat Chemical Crokes, we beat Screen well, and then we had a 12-week wait. And we completely lost that momentum. Well, we came back and beat Crossmaglen in the semi-final, but we didn't even play well to beat them, funnily enough. And we just never got our flow back. And against Ballina in the final, I don't think anyone in the 15 could hold their hands up and say that they played well. And we still only lost by a point. Incredibly, incredibly frustrating. Like, I've lost an under-21 All-Ireland final, which is, you look back and you're pissed off. But we played well that day against Kerry. We conceded 2 early goals, and we only lost by 2 or 3 points. We got it back to a point. And you can look back on that and go, geez, we performed well. That was an excellent Kerry team. Like 6 or 7 of them went on to win Senior All-Irelands. And that wouldn't frustrate me as much. But when you look back on that All-Ireland club final and we just didn't perform on the day, it's the one that really, really, really annoys me. And if we'd lost to Ballina playing well, you could accept that an awful lot better. But we didn't. We lost playing badly. And that's what sticks in the memory, I think.
Yeah, no, it definitely would. And then I'd say, personally, having watched, coverage of GAA like pretty much my entire life, I'd say you and a lot of people like are kind of becoming this new breed of GAA coverage, whereas like RTE and back in the day it was, you become a pundit on RTE or you don't. And now there's a whole nother window opening up with Off the Ball and your own stuff here. Like, when you're coming to the end of your career, did you realize that you were going to do this? Like, at what point were you like, I'm going to go and start doing analysis now, I'm going to go into that career? Did you know before you retired, or was it something you went for?
No, I had no idea what I was doing. I went to 4 colleges, and the 4th one, I went to 5 colleges as it turns out, but the 4th one I went to was Maynooth. And I had done leisure management in Waterford. I'd done marketing in DIT, dropped out, both of them. I'd done advanced tourism in Tralee. I only went down there to play football. And then I did finance in Maynooth. I didn't care about finance. I just picked a course I had the points for. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I had no clue. And I did the 3 years in Maynooth and got a finance degree. And then it's like, what do you do when you come out of finance? I sold limestone for a little while as a sales rep. And then I was like, geez, I probably need to use this degree. And when I came back from traveling, I started working as a fund accountant. And I did that for about 7 years. Hated it, really hated it. Dreaded going in on the Monday and with a hangover, and you'd be drinking more because you wouldn't be, you'd be going in dying, and you kind of wouldn't come out of the cranky mood until Wednesday. And sure, then you're heading back into the weekend. And I was in that kind of rut, really, on Sundays, thinking about work and not wanting to go in. And it was funny, I had no idea of doing what I'm doing now. It was never in my head. I did a little bit of commentary on matches in 6th year in school and really enjoyed it. I did some halftime interviews. I'd left school, and then for the 6th year competitions, that I went back, and it was just randomly, I was at the match watching it. I had dropped out of college, of course, and then I just started doing commentaries with the lads and enjoyed that. But then I got asked to do a Saturday panel on Off the Ball, and I really enjoyed that. And they seemed to like me. And then they asked me to do co-commentaries on their GAA coverage, because they were just after starting getting GAA rights. And I absolutely loved that. I loved it. Loved doing the co-commentaries. And then I went into sideline reporting and loved that too. Loved that even more. And then I started thinking, Jesus, I wonder, is this something that I could potentially do as a job? So I left my job in finance. I applied for a master's in journalism in DCU. I got accepted into that. I left finance. I went back into that full time for a year. And during that year, the second captain's fellas left Off the Ball. And they went out on their own. So there was a 5-person gap in their sports department, and I was doing the course. I had experience working with them already as a pundit and sideline reporter, and then I went in there working part-time. Within the space of a few months, I was made full-time, and that was it. 3 years in Off the Ball, and then left there, and then 5 years in Sports Show doing the GAR, and now I'm out on my own. So I suppose that's as Jim McGuinness calls it, my journey in a nutshell.
Yeah, and just to ask about that, how have you found that transition going from working for a sports show off the ball to now this kind of move that you're on Patreon and all this now, kind of working with the new podcast now? How has that transition gone from where you're entirely your own boss and you're putting out your own content the entire time? Like, do you much prefer this way now, where you've much more control over everything yourself? Or?
Yeah, well, it's funny. I found the transition from off the ball to sports show much different because, like, to be honest, the GAA was my show. Nobody else did anything on the show. What I'm doing now is very, very similar. I'm doing a lot of extra shows, and it's my own business. But work-wise, it's the same. I ran the GAA. Now I'm running, Smaller Fish. So my work week is very, very similar. I have a lot more work to do. But the type of work and the fact that, like, I was doing it already. What's more challenging now is I had to learn, the audio editing. I remembered from off the ball because I did a good bit of that in the 3 years there. But the video editing, I had to learn how to do that. To put out the clips, the promo clips. And then obviously there's the other side of the business with the accountant and all that side that is a pain in the arse and has to be done. And that's probably fills up my week an awful lot more than the bit of downtime I had doing the GAA is spent doing other bloody work when you're on your own. But look, I don't mind. It's challenging and it's good. I really enjoy it. But work-wise on the actual show, it's very, very similar stuff, And I didn't mind that. Coming from off the ball to sports show, I wanted to leave off the ball and I wasn't sure what I was going to do with sports show, and they weren't sure what they were going to do with me. I joined there as a GE editor, whatever hell that meant. And it was just through conversations when I got in there. Then they wanted me to be a pundit on their podcasts instead of presenter. And I had to convince them that I wanted to present. And then I was going to be a presenter across rugby podcasts and soccer podcasts, and then kind of stuck to GAA. And then the obvious thing to do was a Gaelic football podcast, because in off the ball I did no hurling. They didn't really let me onto the hurling chats for whatever reason. And the big challenge then was launching the hurling podcast, because nobody had ever done a hurling podcast before that. There was a couple of football podcasts, and my whole thing was that I do 50-50 hurling and football, an hour each, and give them the exact same. And the talk and work was, the hurling won't be popular. That's not going to take off. And I'm a football man. And, it was definitely a challenge, a bigger challenge, launching that and getting that popular. But it did really, really well. And now there's loads of hurling podcasts out there, but 100%, I'm sure the GAA was the first dedicated hurling hour-long show, and hurling people loved it. So I suppose it's one thing I'm kind of proud of when I look back at the GAA, launching them, because it wasn't really done at that time. Now it's obvious that they're popular, but back then, 100% a hurling podcast, dedicated hurling podcast, hadn't been done before.
Because we'd wanted to ask you about kind of the move into hurling too, considering that you've been playing football the entire time. And like, when you find that you're preparing for a podcast now, do you have a preference kind of still, or would you find yourself that you lean more to hurling, or is it still Gaelic football that you prefer to cover, or like, are you happy with it?
I love both. I love both. It depends on the weekend. Like, I look forward to both shows, but if there's been a couple of great hurling shows, like, I'd be looking forward to hearing what the lads have to say about that, and I have my own thoughts on. And on the hurling show, I kind of present that different. On the hurling show, obviously I'm not a pundit, so I'd be more asking what they think, or I'm ask them, am I right or wrong, or why don't they do this, or whereas in the football I am a pundit and I would be given my own strong opinions kind of differently. So they're definitely different ways of doing them, but I'm not sure which one I prefer. Like, often the hurling matches are more exciting than the football matches, and even though my background is football, my background as a fan is in both of them. So I don't really, I feel a bit more pressure actually on the football show to have insights and notice some tactical stuff. There's no pressure on me in the hurling show. It's up to the pundits to I can float some stuff to them, but I find less pressure on the hurling show in that regard, where I'm sitting down to watch a football match. I'm sitting down to, to find something off and I'll stop the match and I'll rewind it and I'll try to see stuff. Whereas the hurling, I just watch it straight through and enjoy it, and I'll take a few notes and then I just throw it out to the boys. So maybe I'm convincing myself now that I prefer the hurling show.
Yeah, no, like personally from doing coverage, I mean, yourself, Keane Ward in particular, I think is a really good analyst, the points he comes up with. And then on the hurling side, Damien Hayes is one that I think I've listened to a few, and some of the points he's made are really good. But definitely that to me, that kind of changed the game, because now you're seeing like RTE did their own podcast. It's like they noticed, oh shit, like this is actually, people are watching this, people are listening. And me personally, as someone who is a fan, I preferred, your podcast, and I preferred stuff like Off the Ball, because it was a little bit more relatable. It was a bit more real. It wasn't sanitized. The stories you were getting were, the real stories, not the TV version of them. And do you find that interesting as well, that like maybe, I mean, obviously you can't say it as general fact, but it is a bit interesting that RTE kind of noticed that the success that other people were having with podcasts and then ran to do their own one as well?
Yeah, but RTE is very safe, and I wouldn't be RTE's cup of tea at all. They'd be more Damien Lawler or Darren Frehill type fellas, and I'm not sure that makes RTE incredibly popular, but that's the direction that they're going. Like, I would give them a heart attack with the way I kind of present. The style I like for the shows, and it's what I say to all the pundits, is that I say, pretend we're up at the GAA club and we're watching an intermediate match and we're just standing on the sideline and we're just chatting about GAA. That's the style I like. I don't want it to be polished. And often I make mistakes in my presenting. I don't edit them out because I don't sell myself as this polished, perfect presenter. I talk about GAA like everybody talks about GAA. Like you talk about GAA up in your local field, and I've played, at the top level, and all the pundits have, and we can bring that extra little bit in, into the conversations. But the general conversation is no different. And on the podcast, no matter which podcast it is, there is nothing I say on the podcast that I wouldn't say. Like, what you're hearing from me is what you'd hear from me having a pint or being up at watching a match. That there's no difference. I don't change the way I think or talk or anything. I think Damien Hayes is a bit like that. Some of the pundits can be a little bit more guarded, because when you're on air, you're obviously conscious of it. I'm not conscious of it. I just talk exactly like I do off air. And I think that's what people relate to, in that, Jesus, that's like a conversation I heard, down in the club the other day, that there's no, I'll even say there's no political correctness. You just say what you think, and I think that's important. I think that's what why the show is popular, because GAA people relate to the conversations. I don't think they necessarily relate to conversations that might be on RTE or on other stations. But I definitely, from feedback I get from the extended panel and on Twitter, in the direct mails and stuff, is that you talk GAA like we all talk GAA. That's what some people say, and I think that's mostly what I'm trying to get across.
So, Colm, just the last question from me. So, do you think, like, from RTE perspective, this kind of move in recent years, that they've kind of stepped away from the Brollies, the Gerlach Nans, these type of characters? Does that kind of, do you think, harmed kind of the coverage, I suppose, of games as well, and that people's enjoyment of it as well, and that it's just become kind of the sport nearly in a way has become more professional. The coverage nearly is too professional, everything as well. Do you think it's been kind of that the enjoyment's been taken out of it in a certain way with the coverage?
I think RT's coverage of GAA is shocking. They're exclusive right holders. All they do is live matches. There's not one, they don't do any TV shows. Like, or Sky would sicken you with different shows they do on the Premier League. They nearly turn you off it. They're on the other extreme. But I think it's shocking that we have no magazine show. We have no midweek analysis show. We have nothing, only the Sunday game and the live shows. That's it. That's all we have. And that's during championship. For our national games during the summer, when there's no soccer on, there's no rugby on, we have nothing. only the weekend, nothing during the week. I would be doing shows on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday if I was RT. I would be going all in on it. And they don't seem to want it. I think they're lazy. I think they're stuck in their, oh, well, this is what we always did. I think they've tried a couple of TV shows and it doesn't look like they have the talent to be able to do them. The TV shows haven't been great. And I think their all-around thing, like, you know, I quite like Joanne as the presenter. I do think has definitely gotten safer. I think Gerald Nan left of his own accord. Brawley, they got rid of Brawley, but I think it's a little bit safe. But then again, TV's not as easy as podcasts. You know, I've done TV before. It's not as easy. So on the Sunday game, you have to remember they're very tight with time. I've done the Sunday game once before, and you have producers in your ear telling you wrap that up. We've only got, you know, a minute to wrap up that segment. It's not an easy job they have, and that's why I think they absolutely should take the pressure off themselves and do a show on a Monday night, a Tuesday night, a Wednesday night, and share the load, the burden of that Sunday night. And then you could have a much more in-depth chat on the Tuesday night. Whereas some people criticize them for the highlight show, we don't get enough analysis, or it's very, very difficult to do that. And it's very difficult in the time that you have. So if I was in charge in RT, I would do a highlight show on the Sunday night, very heavy on highlights and light on analysis, but I'd absolutely be coming back during the week and giving people the analysis that they want when you have more time, you know, and you could focus on one game, two games, and you're not stuck for that time. So definitely, I don't have a problem necessarily with the pundits. I like Joanne. I think their job is very, very difficult.
Yeah, I agree. And the one thing I could never wrap my head around was how there's not more like documentaries, how there's not more kind of Lech or Gales type stuff on RT, and that's where TG Caher really is the lifesaver. But just before we wrap up, because we've kept you long enough, obviously, you know, the GAA Championship now that ourselves are in the absolute disarray now. Dublin don't look like they're anywhere near the beast that they were. Kerry, Tyrone and Mayo really are the three that I'm kind of looking at as between them for the All-Ireland for me. But what are you thinking yourself?
Look, for the last couple of years, you've been waiting for this Kerry team to stand up and be counted and be the team that, you know, they have the potential to be. Whether they can do it, I think if Kerry win one, they'll win a few more. That Kerry team, you know, Clifford might have 4 or 5 All-Irelands when he finishes up, but they really need to win one soon, or they'll turn into a Rory McIlroy at the Masters, and it'll become a psychological thing that they can't get over the line, because you know, they have to win some of those tight games, and they're not winning the tight games. They're blowing teams away. But when it comes down to a battle against Dublin in that final, against Cork in the Munster final they lost, against Tyrone last year, they're not winning those games. They need to get over the line in those really, really tight, tense battles, or it's going to become an issue for that team, because when they blow teams away, they look fantastic. But you really want to see them this year coming in. They lost the league final against Mayo in a battle, if you remember, a really tense one as well. And this Kerry team really need to do that. I hope to do, because I really like them. I love the way they play football. I think Mayo will always be thereabouts. Whether they're good enough to win an All-Ireland, I'm not too sure. Tyrone never really seemed to be able to win it 2 in a row. I don't think they'll win it this year either. I think it's between Kerry and Dublin, if I'm being honest. Who's going to win the All-Ireland. But the great thing about it is that Dublin have come back into the pack. You're looking at a much more open All-Ireland. Like, you're looking at Mayo, you're looking at Tyrone, Dublin, Kerry, and then you're throwing in the Galways, Monaghan's, Donegal gone backwards a little bit, and even Armagh might step up into that conversation. So, like, for the first time in a long time, we're looking at 6, 7, 8 teams that could say, look, Jesus, if we could get a run into a quarter-final, semi-final, we might have a novel pairing this year. It'd be great, wouldn't it be great to see Kerry Armagh final or something like that? Even a Dublin Armagh, or Dublin Donegal final, something different. We've been kind of getting Mayo, Kerry, and Dublin for a long time now. So whatever happens, it would be really nice to see one of these outside top-tier teams coming through. Imagine a Monaghan in a final, or a Donegal, or an Armagh, something like that. Kildare hardly do it. So it'd be great if one of those teams could step up and get into a final, have a novel pairing.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Colm, listen, thanks a million for coming on today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
No problem at all, lads, and best of luck with your show. I hope it goes well for you.
Perfect, guys. Make sure to have a look at Smaller Fish GAA as well. Best of luck with it, Colm.
Thanks, lads.
All right, have a good one.
Great stuff. Good luck, boys.